right. Well, thanks everybody for logging on to learn about long distance real estate investing. So, this is our first official meeting webinar with REI USA. So, I'm really excited to be here and share what I've learned down my road of investing long distance. So my name is Jennifer Ward, and I live in Denver, but invest in Indianapolis and have been in the Indianapolis market right now for going on 3 years. So not terribly long, but enough to really get to know the city. So today or tonight, I'm going to explain a little bit about how to analyze different markets and how to make that decision of where to put the pin when you're deciding to invest in an outside market. And then I'll go into a little bit deeper information about Indianapolis. So if that's a market that might be of interest to you, you'll get a little bit of more insight on it. Each meeting or each webinar that I host every month, I hope to have a different investor or real estate professional sharing with us about their particular market. So I'll post that on the REI USA Facebook group, and then I'll also share about my own Facebook group as well, where you can get that information too. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, and if you have any questions, you're welcome to interrupt me during the presentation, or just put it in the Q&A and I'll make sure I tackle that at the end. So, okay, we'll get going. Hopefully my computer will operate. All right, so why invest long distance? Well, that really comes down to why invest at all in real estate. But when we're talking about real estate investing and what you want to get out of it, a lot of people talk about cash flow. So they want to generate an income for themselves to supplement their current income, or to live off of completely, or to help save for retirement. So I personally decided to invest in Indianapolis because it offered a better cash flow opportunity than my home market did, Denver, Colorado. And then another reason why I decided to invest long distance, other than a much better cash flow opportunity, was because of freedom. Yeah. So I'm investing in real estate to have more of a passive income. So I don't have to be on the computer every day, on the phone, in meetings, have a traditional W-2 type job or schedule. I want to have more freedom than that. I've got a toddler who's 18 months and going all over the place. And so I wish I had a little bit more freedom before, but now I really need my freedom. And beforehand, before I really started diving into real estate and learning a lot more and learning about different strategies, we did have a rental property in Denver. We initially bought our primary home, and it was a fixer-upper. So we did a live-in flip. That was a lot of fun. And then when we were done, we thought we initially were going to just sell it and get some cash that way. But then in Denver, we were like, oh, wow, the rents here are pretty high. And, we did get a good deal on this house. We don't have a huge mortgage. I bet we could make some pretty good money renting it out. So we did. And we rented it out for 3 years. And we had one of those unicorn tenants where their dad paid their rent 2 weeks early every month. But then when it was time, when that tenant decided to move out, we tried to re-rent it for the same amount, and we weren't getting that many bites. And then also, while we were renting it out, we were the managers. So we got the phone calls about, of course, the notorious toilet situation, anything that could come up, we got the call to try to go and fix it. And so, of course, me being a financially frugal minded person, I always like, well, if it's something we could do, we should go do it. So, fast forward when we really started diving more into real estate, I was thinking about, if we continue to invest in our home market, we are going to be the ones going to do, the landlord duties and take care of any housing tenant issues. Um, of course, we could have hired a property manager, but again, I'm the mindset, if I can do it, I'm going to do it. So the only way to take me out of that equation was to consider investing long distance. And I mean way long distance. So Indianapolis, not just a few hours drive away from me. So it's definitely going to have to take a flight. Otherwise, yeah, it's a few days driving. So it forces me to rely on my team members and people to take care of those problems that can come up, because they will come up with any real estate investment property you have. So that's again another reason why to invest long distance, a long explanation for freedom. All right, so then once you make that decision, okay, yes, I think I want to invest long distance. So where? It's you could go anywhere. You could go across the world. It doesn't have to be in the US, but I think it's a little bit uh, more conservative and probably a safer strategy to go ahead and invest within your own country, at least from the start. But of course, the U.S. is huge, right? So where do you put that pin? You hear all over the place. Oh, I invest in here, I invest in there. So where do you decide? Because everybody's a fan of their own market typically. Well, I went ahead and looked at it at a very strategic way, you could say. And after reading tons of articles and blogs, I was like, okay, I need to put something down, like get a system to analyze all these different markets that I keep seeing pop up and reading about as, top cash flowing markets or hot markets to invest in. So I went ahead and thought about, what variables you should consider when investing in long distance. I mean, of course, these are variables you want to consider no matter if you're investing at home or, across the country. So I went ahead and made a spreadsheet, and I put each of these variables in their own column. So I'll kind of go through them. All right, so rent to value. Of course, this is considering that you're looking to invest in buy and hold properties. So that's what I was doing at the time and still doing with a mix of some other strategies, but rent to value. So, um, you hear about, especially on bigger pockets, like that 1% rule. There's pros and cons to that, but let's say we are looking at that 1% rule. So I wanted to make sure that wherever I invested, my rent was at least 1% of the value of the property. And if I was going to do any rehab to the property, for me, I want it to be like the after repair value. So for example, if you buy a property for $100,000, then you would want the rent to be at minimum $1,000. A lot of the Midwest markets can offer more than 1%. So that was one of my main criterias. Then let's move on to insurance to value. So you have to have insurance. It's just one of those things that you must do unless, I don't know, you're a congillionaire, and if something happens to your property, no big deal. You can just fork up another 100 grand to build the property. But in general, we all have insurance, I would say, on our properties. But, insurance varies from market to market. And since it's kind of a necessary thing that you need to pay each month or each year, how much of that is being used up by your cash flow? So to me, I wanted to look at what the average insurance premiums were in a given market and see how much that would take away from, again, my cash flow. And then the next necessary evil is taxes. So, how much taxes are you paying according to the value of your property? Um, there's certainly a lot of markets where taxes are high, particularly in states where there's not income tax. So that means the property taxes are higher, such as Texas. So that's a consideration. And again, that's something that eats into your cash flow pretty quickly. The next variable I like to consider is the rent to income. So whatever the average rent is for that area, is it affordable for the people in that market? Is it a reasonable amount for people to pay according to what their income is? And so, because that's going to help mitigate any risk. If it's affordable for them to live and it's a decent rental income for you as well, then it's a win-win situation. And that will hopefully prevent any need for evictions. People can't pay rent because of, oh, God forbid, some pandemic comes up and they lost their job. So, is there a way that they can continue to pay the rent even if their income situation changes? So, again, making sure the area is affordable is important to me. Then there's population growth. So are people moving to that market or are they moving away? Generally, you probably wouldn't want to invest in a market where people are moving out of. That's not a very promising tenant pool down the line. So that's a pretty obvious factor to consider. And then kind of with that, I'm going to jump to unemployment. So, how is the job market in that area? Are jobs increasing or decreasing? And that kind of goes with the rent to income as well and population growth. So, are people able to stay there because their jobs are stable? So if the unemployment keeps increasing in a particular market from year to year, then that's something to be skeptical about to invest there. Then you can look at crime. Of course, I like to take crime with just a grain of salt because crime obviously varies a lot. Is it just some petty theft or is it some more serious hard crimes? But you ideally wouldn't want to be in an area where it's serious hard crimes. But if it seems to be a pocket just with some petty theft, then I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. And then another variable to consider is appreciation. However, I don't use appreciation as a major variable, but it is good to see, is that market appreciating or does it depreciate? You could kind of weigh that similar to like unemployment. If there's unemployment keeps increasing, that could also mean then it's a depreciating market. So, but I don't invest for appreciation. I invest for cash flow. If I buy a property and it appreciates, I definitely see that as icing on the cake. But again, if it's depreciating, that's not a good thing. So. All right, so those are some of my main variables I look, but then there's some other variables that you want to look at. So when you're investing long distance, most likely you're going to be hiring a property manager. And that is a necessary team member to make sure that things are running smoothly, that tenants are paying, and that you have boots on the ground to handle any issues. Of course, some people do it without property managers, but I am generally in favor of them. So, of course, they come with a fee. So, what is that fee? In my market, it's about 10%. Now, if you start getting to a certain number of units, you can negotiate that a little bit more. But however, there are other markets I know of, such as Memphis, for example, and their space management fee is 8%. So that would be in your favor because you can pay them less compared to other markets. The other thing is industry. So that would kind of connect to that other variable we talked about with unemployment as well as population. So but as far as like jobs and security for people, for your tenants, but I also like to make sure that even though there may be say there's a military base or a university, that brings in a lot of jobs and therefore helps grow the population. I want to make sure that's not the only industry. So is there a diversification of industries is what I'm getting to. So making sure that there's a variety of types of jobs and larger employers. So you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. Because let's say if you were in a university town, well, look what's happening with the pandemic. I mean, a lot of universities are transitioning right now to online learning. So there isn't as much of a need for the students to be in the town or city where the university is. And that could impact you if you had a rental property there. Then we have rental property expectations. So what's expected of your property or what's expected by tenants in order to rent your property? So there could be a few things, but one thing that kind of was brought up this year for me is, are appliances expected in that market? So do you have to provide the refrigerator or the stove or the dishwasher? Um, I learned that there are markets where that's not expected, that when a tenant moves in, they're supposed to provide their own appliances, which could be a huge money saver as an investor. I'm in a market where it is expected. So we had a stove break this year. So that was around $500 to replace. That's a huge just bite in our cash flow. So that's something to think about. Um, Another variable, tenant landlord laws. So this really comes to when you're talking about evictions, if the tenant were to not pay. So how easy or fast is it to evict that tenant? And so that comes down to the laws. In general, usually the coastal areas are more tenant friendly. And then as you get more into the center of the US, they become, or in some southern states, it become more landlord friendly. So it's a little bit faster to evict tenants. But um, but I've also have learned in my experience that tenant landlord laws are very like hyper local as well. I mean, yes, there may be general state laws provided in a system, but I had the unfortunate situation of a tenant not paying for a whole year through this pandemic. They stopped paying before, and then the moratoriums came in place. And I did try to evict them right before COVID really went widespread. And even though Indiana is generally known as a tenant, or I'm sorry, a landlord state, favorable state, the particular judge for my county where my property was very tenant friendly. So they favored in for the tenant. So that might be an exception, but that's just to say, like, just because a state is notoriously landlord friendly doesn't mean like your county is. So something to look into. And then another factor to consider when looking at markets, are there multiple service providers? So I generally in favor of cities rather than smaller towns, just because there's more resources there. Um, for example, Indianapolis has, many different property management companies. I'm going to be talking about property management a lot tonight because it's usually one of the top team members when investing long distance, but it's hard to find a good one that where you and the manager align with your business practices and preferences. So I have been through I guess 4 property management companies. So that just shows that, if you're in a smaller town and you only have 1 or 2 options, then that can kind of hinder, your preference of investing or with your rental properties, like how you like to manage it. You're kind of stuck with 1 or 2, or or manage it yourself if that's something you're comfortable with. So I like to go into places that have multiple providers of each trade. So that way you have a pretty good selection to interview with or interview from. Okay, so those were the variables. So then how do you find the information for each of these variables? So these are some websites I found particularly helpful. So Value Penguin, that one was for insurance actually. So you can go on there. Of course, you could contact an insurance broker and they might be able to give you a rough idea of what insurance premiums are on different markets you're considering. Of course, that actually may be the more accurate way if they're willing to do that for you. But Value Penguin kind of gives you a snapshot. Then there's World Population Review, gives you the population of a particular area, if it's increasing or declining. Citydata.com offers a good variety of information. So they'll give you the average home values, average income, average rent. But again, these are all averages. So you've really got to take it with a grain of salt. Neighborhood Scout does also a really great job. They have upgrade options where you can pay to get even more data. Both City Data and Neighborhood Scout, also show you crime. But my understanding, Neighborhood Scout can really give you some more in-depth info about that, about the crime situation. But yeah, that's a really solid resource, I would say, is neighborhoodscout.com. And then, of course, Bigger Pockets. That's kind of how I initially got started, trying to figure out which cities to look at. So that's where you can get some more insider information, some anecdotal information from other investors. All right, so here was my spreadsheet that I did back in 2018 was the latest one I've done. So haven't done one recent. So this is where I was looking at the different markets. So at the time, I heard a lot about Atlanta being a great market, Cleveland, Memphis, Kansas City, Indianapolis, some about Minneapolis. And then I had Albuquerque on here because it was closer to Denver, but so is Kansas City. And it was drivable. So I wasn't, sure if I wanted to only go to a market where I had to fly to. So then I went to all those various websites and I collected my information. And so that's where, and so what I did is I just made ratios of everything essentially. So I divided the rent to the property value or the average home value. And I got this, and then I divided the rent to income and then the taxes to value. And then I just kind of made a notation in here, went just as a quick reference. So the higher the number, the better, or the lower the number, the better for that particular variable, just as, again, as a quick snapshot for me. And so I took this and I looked at it and I compared, and the reason I chose Indianapolis is because, as you can see, it never hit the best, the number one of all the variables, nor the worst. There was definitely some cities that hit the best. So let's look. Cleveland, right? Cleveland hit the best for your rent to value. However, it was the highest for rent to income. So it didn't seem that affordable for folks. And also, it was the highest for taxes to value. So you really don't have much control over that. So that's why I crossed Cleveland out. And then let's see, another one we have is, I can kind of show you. So let's say Albuquerque was the best in regards to taxes to value. But rent to value, it was pretty darn low. So one of the lowest, not the lowest, but not far. So, but when I looked at Indianapolis, it always reached like it was like the second best, if not at I would say at least third best, but on average, second best for all the variables. So it kind of made a flat line all the way through. And I really like that because it was predictable. Um, you'll hear people in Indianapolis describe it as vanilla. So that's kind of what I was wanting at the time. I wanted a market that was predictable, that was stable, that didn't give you many surprises. So that's what I use to put the pin in Indianapolis. All right, next. So here's the downtown area of Indianapolis. So what I did once I made that decision to invest in Indianapolis, the first thing I decided was, okay, I need to take a trip there. I need to build my team, right? And so when planning my trip, and of course, I realize this is different today with the pandemic. I personally have not been traveling, at least by plane, since the whole pandemic, but oops, sorry. But if you're comfortable going during this time, this is what I would recommend you to do. And then when you're ready to travel, obviously the same. So the first thing I did was I looked for the local real estate investor association groups in Indianapolis. So to do that, I just went on Google first and just Googled Indianapolis Real Estate Investor Association. They have about two or three. Usually there's always one official association for each market that is affiliated with the National Real Estate Investor Association. I also went on meetup.com. That's a good resource to find out when they're actually having meetings. And then Facebook. Of course, now, okay, you're watching this through REI USA. So that's a new one today that would have been super helpful to me a couple of years ago, where I could just go on one of the state virtual meetings and learn about that market and network with others. But I mean, I still recommend that you utilize several different resources to find local groups. So, and hopefully a lot of them today are doing virtual meetings outside of REI USA. Hopefully the official RIAs are hosting these meetings virtually. But if you do take a trip to the area, what I also did was I booked through Airbnb, and I looked for where the host was also living in the property that I would book a room from. The reason I did that was because I wanted the opportunity to chat with the host about the city and learn about it from a local. So I definitely recommend that when you feel safe to travel and stay with the locals. Um, you could also take a tour when you're in India or when you're in your select market. It sounds a little hokey or touristy, but yeah, you are a tourist initially. So why not do what tourists do? But it's also a great way just to kind of see the neighborhoods. And Airbnb has these experiences now, so that could be a fun way to learn about the city, just booking an experience as well. Then before you go, I would set up meetings with several different realtors, several different property managers, and as well as investors. Meet with the local investors. Networking with on Bigger Pockets or the Facebook groups. Um, so setting up in-person meetings with them would be really helpful. I mean, you could do this too virtually. So if I would definitely recommend, though, if you are going to try to do this from home in some capacity, to at least do a video call with them, just to have the face to the voice, and it's a little bit more personal, in my opinion. And then, if you can, meet with a few contractors. I did that because I was going to try the BRRRR method when I first started investing in Indianapolis. So the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And so I knew I wanted to do some rehab to a certain extent. So I was able to meet with at least one contractor at that time who had a business focused on out of state investors, because in Indianapolis, there's quite a few of us. So, and I also wanted to mention when I made my schedule, just a tip, first base your schedule off of when those regular scheduled meetings are with the REIAs or any other investor group in that area. And then work your meetings with the individuals like the realtors, property managers, investors, and contractors outside of that schedule. So that's what I did, and it worked out really nicely. It was a packed visit, let me say, but it was well worth it. So again, I've referenced about your team. So especially when you're going long distance, your team is critical. If you're investing in your home market, you could try to do it mostly by yourself, all aspects, but I still wouldn't recommend it. Always having a team, I think, is helpful, and especially if you're going long distance. So property managers, again, are generally your number one. And I say they're your number one, well, because you're going to deal with them on a more regular basis. So, if you have a rental property, you're probably going to hear from them about some maintenance issues, get reports on rent collection, things of that nature. So you're just going to have more regular contact with them, but they also will probably have almost all of the other connections that you need. So a lot of property management companies have a brokerage affiliated with them. So they can connect you with a realtor through their brokerage, or if they don't, and even if they do, they'll definitely have contacts with realtors outside of their company. Because most of the time, they're getting new clients from realtors who just help somebody buy a property. They're for sure going to have contacts with contractors. So they may have an in-house crew, or they'll have relationships with other contractors who they typically use for their maintenance. And many times property managers will take on rehab work for their clients. They might do not only property management, but project management, and where they still collect a fee for that. But they'll get bids from contractors and oversee the rehab that's going on. So there's also usually an all-in-one resource, which would be turnkey. So where it's your realtor essentially, property management, excuse me, and contractor all wrapped in one. Sorry. So I think there's some pros and cons to that. Obviously, it's very convenient to work with a turnkey provider. You just have one contact that handles all the needs of having a rental property. However, I guess I'm of the mindset I don't like to put all my eggs in one basket. And each of these trades or I guess jobs or roles, I should say, such as property management, realtor, or contractor, they're all very distinct and have different responsibilities. And obviously, a company may have strengths and weaknesses in one or the other. And so if I was with a turnkey provider and I didn't necessarily like how they did the rehab, but I really liked how they just manage the properties and screen tenants and whatnot in their system to keep me updated, I would hate to say goodbye completely to that contact in order to be able to have a different contractor work on the rehab side of things. So again, it's like a don't put all your eggs in one basket kind of scenario. I like to For me, I went without the turnkey. So that way, if for whatever reason things went south with my property manager, I didn't have to start completely over and find a new realtor and a new contractor. Because again, I'm on my fourth property management company. So maybe I'm the difficult one. That's probably it. Okay, so the other team members that are just as valuable is your inspector. So whenever you are buying a property, especially long distance, you definitely want to have an inspection done. I mean, yes, people do it without, particularly when they're working with wholesalers, but I guess I'm of the more conservative mindset, and I would not buy property without an inspection. And I mean, that could be with, a licensed inspector, but you could, if you, once you have a well-established relationship with a contractor, you could send them in to do the inspection, and they may not charge you for it because they have that trust that you'll hire them for any work that needs to be done after you buy the property. So that's always an option too. But in general, you're probably going to hire a licensed inspector. The other person that's part of your team would be the lender. So if you do need a loan to purchase the property, you're going to want to have a solid lender. Again, usually realtors and lenders kind of work hand in hand. So if you found a realtor, ask them what lenders they recommend. If you went ahead and contacted a lender first, ask them what realtors they work with. And then also insurance, you can shop around for your insurance. It's not like taxes where you're just stuck. So at least, you can shop around for insurance. So finding I think an insurance broker that can save you the time and shop for you all different policies with different carriers is really helpful. So again, some of your other team players will probably have contacts for insurance brokers. I would say property managers for sure, because they're usually working with the insurance in case there's any claims. And then title company. So I actually found it worthwhile to shop around for what title company I wanted to use when buying my property. That is something you can negotiate when buying. So sometimes the seller may have already a title company listed, but if you found one that is more affordable, because they do have some adjustable fees that vary from title company to title company, then you can request to use that one. Also, title companies can be helpful outside of just the actual closing of a property. Some title companies can help pull you lists. So if you're trying to find an off-market deal, they can help you with some of those lists. And then also, if you find an off-market deal, checking in on the clear, how clean the title is and so forth. So it's worth having a good relationship with the title company. Okay, so here's my first property that we bought in Indianapolis. It is on the west side of Indianapolis, and it was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath property. I think around right at 1,000 square feet. So I did the BRRRR method with this, and here were my numbers. So the purchase price was around $44,000. I think it was listed, if I recall, at like 55,000, and then we put an offer in right around like 48. And then after the inspection happened, there was some issues that we brought up, and so we were able to get it reduced even more. Then after buying it, we did some rehab, and it needed 20,000 approximately. That was more than the initial estimate I had, just because we had some water mitigation we had to take care of in the crawl space. So when I was finished with it, it appraised for $75,000. And I was able to refinance that. So usually when you refinance on an investment property, you're supposed to put 25% down. So I ended up getting a loan for $56,000. So as you see, 44 plus 20,000. I put 64,000 in, so I left about $8,000 in the deal. So, obviously the goal with BRRRRs are to take out all your money, or even get some extra money after refinancing. But I find that that's not as common as people like to make it sound. So, but at least taking out the majority of your cash is better than nothing at all. And then I was able to rent it for $1,050 a month. So pretty good there, being all in at like 65,000, let's say, and making 1,050. So that's pretty well over that's definitely well over the 1%. So I was happy about that one. Okay, so let me wait before I go through on other ways you can connect with me. I wanted to kind of go through a little bit about the different neighborhoods in Indianapolis to kind of give you more of a insider's peek. So let's see. Okay, so this was a map that somebody put together on Bigger Pockets, and I'm happy to share the link to this. I don't have it. It was, well, actually, one second. So it was the Guide Grading Indianapolis neighborhood. So if you went on Bigger Pockets and kind of search for that term, you could, or like grading neighborhoods of Indianapolis, that blog should come up. So this is what I found when I was like just starting to look more into Indianapolis. But there's several other cities I found that somebody did a similar map. How do I get back? Sorry, bear with me. Because I wanted to show you like the wide zoom. Oh, okay. We'll just do it like that. Okay, so this is Indianapolis. So if you see, there is a ring around Indianapolis, 465. So everybody kind of talks about Indianapolis as a big circle. All right. So the A neighborhoods are the green. So those are going to be your generally your like white collar, I'm sorry, neighborhoods. So higher home values, definitely higher rents, but generally the A neighborhoods I find don't have the best like rent to home value ratio. So they generally don't meet that 1% rule. And then vice versa, the red are going to be your rougher neighborhoods. So like your C, or I'm sorry, not C, not even, they're going to be like your D. And what did they say? Yeah, D neighborhoods. And then the orange are going to be like your C and C, some D neighborhoods. So your medium neighborhoods. And then I'm sorry. And then the yellow is mostly C, and then the orange is C and D. Okay, there we go. So it's kind of a combination of C and D. So I will point out, it's kind of hard to see as I'm trying to zoom in for you, and hopefully you can see this okay. But so some really hot neighborhoods right now in Indianapolis are Fountain Square and Bates Hendricks. This has been like a revitalized area of Indianapolis where it's become very trendy, and you'll see a lot of flips going on. And let me backtrack and tell you that Indianapolis is very block to block. So you will be on one block that will see some rehab properties, and then the next block will be all boarded up. So it's when you're doing like the Google Maps and you're using, you know, the road the road imagery, you want to keep that in mind. Like, so if you have an address and you go to that block and it looks like it's a nice neighborhood, definitely work your way around to the next block, because it it will likely be a different story, which doesn't mean that it's not a good area to invest. It's just that's the nature of it. And so don't assume that all the houses on a particular block is what the whole neighborhood represents. And I find that pretty representative of a lot of the Midwest larger cities like Cleveland. I've definitely heard that's how it is, Milwaukee as well. So but I have some notes that I'll share of what some recommended neighborhoods are. I did a recent poll. So other areas that are good are that aren't saturated with investors, like Fountain Square and Bates Hendrick, are Christian Park and Garfield Park. So let me go ahead and open up. Sorry, I got a lot going on my computer right now. Let me go ahead and open up just the map for Indianapolis, and we'll kind of go show you a little bit closer. And if anybody has any questions right now, please unmute yourself, ask questions. It's hard for me to right now look at the chats as I'm searching. So, okay. So let's go ahead and put in Garfield so you can kind of see. I'll just put that in because that'll put us into Garfield. Yeah, so Garfield wasn't far from Bates Hendricks and Fountain Square. So as you can see, Fountain Square right there, and it's just south of Bates Hendricks. So this area is usually considered Garfield. So that's an area to consider investing as well. And Christian Park is right next to it a lot. So Riverside and Hawville, that is kind of further west section of Indianapolis. So we have this main river that comes through, the White River. And so on the west side of the river is Hawville, and this area just kind of further north of Hawville, where you see this golf course, that's in between on the very east side of the river, but on the west side of this Highway 65, that would be like your Riverside area. So there's definitely a lot of new development coming along there. Though if you were to go there, it might seem like it's more of a CD area, but that is a growing area for investors, particularly for rental properties. Other notes are townships all around. So that's how Indianapolis works. They have townships in addition to the city. So townships, as you can see here, they're usually on the outskirts of 465. So right outside the ring, they're referred to as donut townships. So like right here, you have Perry Township and Franklin Township. Up here, we have Lawrence. And then I believe, let's see, this is called where Carmel is. Carmel is, it's more of a town, and it's an A area, I would say for sure. You'll find properties there on average 300,000 to 400,000, but that would be like your Hamilton Township. But townships are generally pretty solid rental property areas because they have good school districts. So, you know, you won't have any problems filling in any vacant properties in those areas because of the schools. The property that I showed you, I'll show you where that is on the map. It's on the west area near Avon. Avon is also a little town, like suburb town, west of Indianapolis that has really good schools, but I'm not considered Avon, but it's not far from it. So I went on the outside of 465 on that one. And then here's Avon and more of the green area. And then that's my property. So that might be a nice strategy to kind of see where those A areas are and just kind of get right to the border of them where the home values are a little bit more affordable. My other properties are in this Devington area, so close to the Lawrence Township, but still part of Indianapolis inside the 465 ring. And let me see if there's any other, ones that are higher prices are Hamilton, Boone, and Hendricks counties. So Hamilton, I mentioned, was around Carmel. And then here, let me show you Broad Ripple. I always hear that one a lot. Broad Ripple. Yep. Yeah. So Broad Ripple is just north of Indianapolis and actually just south, like I would say between Broad Ripple and Meridian Kessler. So there's this area that they call Sobro. And that is also a really trendy area that you'll find a good variety of properties that will be good candidates for flips as well as rental properties. So overall, you're going to see, I would say, a lot of investor activity just north of the city of downtown. So I don't know if you can see my mouse at all, but around Broad Ripple, Meridian, Kessler, Butler, Tarkington, and then down even to this Fall Creek area, I think are pretty popular for investors. Also means it's a little harder to find deals. And then, what's been pretty heavily hit already is, as I mentioned already, Fountain Square, also Grace Tuxedo area has absorbed some of the Fountain Square activity, and then that Bates Hendricks. So, but if you go a little bit further south, that's where we were kind of pinpointing that Garfield area. That you'll probably find still some good deals. And it's also pretty close to one of the major universities in the area. And then, if you're focused on rental properties, my suggestion would be to you'll have just a better quality of property or tenant pool outside of the 465 ring. So, okay. And let me think. Oh, and I'd like to mention also this organization. I haven't done anything with them, but I'm sure most markets would have something like this that I think is an interesting strategy to look into. So there's Renew Indianapolis. And what they do is they work with the city to find areas that need improvement, so need renovation. And they offer really great deals on properties. I mean, I've seen them for as low as 10,000. So I guess they don't tell the price here, but it is fairly extensive process. It's like an application you have to fill out. And you have to provide project details of what you're going to do to the property, and prove that you have the funding to get it done, to not only buy but also complete the project. And then you have to do it within 2 years. So I'm sure it's, I haven't yet done it, but I just think this, is something to consider for any off market. Well, they are on market deals, but at very almost like off market prices. So that's something to think about. Look into the city and see what projects are going on and what organizations to contact about those projects, and what avenues they're offering to buy properties to contribute towards their ongoing projects. So, all right. Let me trying to open up my Zoom window. It's not letting me. Stop share. All right, so that's all I have for tonight. I hope this was helpful. If you want to raise your hand or just type in the Q&A or the chats area. Oh, okay. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate the comment. Thanks for letting me know you enjoyed the presentation. So yeah, next month, I will definitely have more in-depth detail about a different market. I generally won't go over my process to invest in long distance, but happy to connect with anybody about it. My process. Oh, and just to remind folks, sorry, before you all go, just how you can reach me as well. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again one more time. Bear with me, sorry. I'll be more polished next time. You think I would be a pro at this since I do this quite frequently. All right, share. I'm just going to show you how you can reach me. So I have the Facebook group, which is Long Distance Real Estate Investors. So if you just go on Facebook and do Long Distance Real Estate Investors, you can reach me that way. And that's where I'll post announcements of upcoming webinars that we're doing, but I'll also share it on the REI USA for next month of what the market will be. I don't know yet, but I'm sure it'll be one of everybody's interest. Usually I try to find the more popular ones or the hot markets. And then I have a Facebook group for REI Mamas. So I have a passion to help other moms invest in real estate. So you can look me up that way. My email is jennifer@reimamas.com. But if you don't want to bother going online and finding all these places, I am sharing a link where you can fill out this form. So you can click on this form, just provide me your general contact information, and then I can make sure to stay in contact with you about any information I'm sharing and get you connected in other ways. So, okay. Well, thanks again, everybody. I really appreciate you coming on. I wish I could see your faces. I usually am able to when I do these things. So maybe that's why I feel a little off today. But anyways, all right. Well, I hope you got some value out of this. And please connect with me through Facebook or email or whatever way is most convenient for you. And I hope to see you again next month, where we'll dive into another market to consider investing. All right. Have a good night. Bye.